Joining me for tonight's Big Picture Rumble are Patrick Hedger, Policy Director with American Encore, Stuart Acuff, National Organizing Director with the National Union of Hospital and Healthcare Employees, and Jennifer Kearns, contributor to Washington Times and The Blaze. And great to see you all. Thank you for joining us.
Thanks for having us. Great to see you, Tom.
So you heard my intro, and I don't get why. Well, actually, there's a couple of other data points in here that I think are worth noting. In 2009, a report that was put together in 2007 and 2008 by the Bush administration's Department of Justice on right-wing extremism was released. The Obama administration had nothing to do with it other than that it was released while Obama was president. The right-wing blowback was so great that they shut down that part of the Department of Justice that was looking at right-wing extremism for 3 years. Shut them down, withdrew the report. This is nuts. And on top of that, according to the New America Foundation, 21 people have been killed in attacks motivated by Islamic extremism in the United States since 9/11. 21. 34 people have been killed by right-wingers in attacks in the United States since 9/11. And just yesterday, authorities in Colorado made an arrest in the January 6th bombing of an NAACP building in Colorado Springs. It continues. It's like every month there's a right-wing.
You're saying since 9/11, so you're talking about 34 people since 9/11 versus 21 people since 9/11. What about the 3,000 that died on 9/11?
It was a one-off.
A one-off. What about the World Trade Center? What about the Kenya bombings?
Kenya, it was 9/11. That was 9/11, and Kenya was in Kenya. I'm talking about the United States.
Well, it was still U.S. targets. But again, I'm kind of offended as a person that considers myself right-wing to be affiliated with people that are taking very loose ideas, maybe affiliated with the right-wing ideology, and being used to condemn all of the right-wing. I mean, this is the same
promoting
thing,
their ideas.
This is the same thing that the president is talking about with why are we calling them Islamic terrorists? We don't want to link them to all of these peaceful people that are part of Islam. Well, I'm a peaceful person that believes in ideas of limited government, so don't affiliate me with a couple wackos.
So that's a good point. What would you call, Patrick, and I'd love to get the answer from all three of you, what would you call somebody who kills a police officer in the name of smaller government, lower taxes, and less regulation?
A jerk.
Oh, okay. All right. Stuart,
You know, Tom, we have a long history of right-wing terrorism in America. Between 1880 and 1968, there were 4,700 lynchings in America. Now,
done by Southern Democrats, but go on.
Southern Democrats?
Yeah, Southern Democrats. Who was pushing Jim Crow? It wasn't the Republican Party.
Patrick wants to bring up a discussion of Nixon's Southern strategy, where Nixon said, let's get all those racist Democrats in the South and turn them into Republicans, which he did.
Progressives, they were progressives.
4,700 lynchings. And Patrick, you may think that a lynching is a hanging. It's not. It's hours of torture.
Yeah, it's terrible. It was committed by progressives.
No, it wasn't.
Who set racial immigration quotas?
The progressives. The progressives were. Lincoln was a progressive. The progressives were the abolition movement. The progressives were the labor movement. It was conservatives who were lynching people. It was people,
absolutely not.
The definition of conservative is maintain the social order.
You know better than that.
The Democratic Party had a member of the KKK in Congress up until what, 5 years ago?
In 1995, Timothy McVeigh and Terry Nichol bombed the Murrah Federal Building on behalf of right-wing causes.
The Weather Underground blew up the Pentagon. 1,500
people died.
They wanted to kill people.
600 people were injured. And just yesterday, a federal judge in Mississippi sentenced 2 young right-wingers to life in prison for lynching. We have the...
Bill Ayers is doing elementary education in this country. His group tried to blow up the Pentagon. Just because he's a worse terrorist than other right-wing terrorists doesn't mean it's okay.
Hang on just a second. I was there. I knew these people. I was in SDS. I knew members of the Weather Underground. Nobody wanted to kill anybody.
Then why are they planting bombs? What is a bomb supposed to do?
They would go out of there.
First
of all, I'm not defending what they did. I was opposed to planting bombs. I thought it was a stupid idea. I thought it was reactionary. It would blow up. But I can tell you, from having known those people, Patrick, this is a bit of history you should learn. That they would plant those things so that they would go off at 5 o'clock in the morning or 10 o'clock at night. They went out of their way to not.
Oh, so they did not kill the janitors.
Well, you know, that actually happened once, and it pretty much is what took down the Weather Underground. Jennifer, you're
Yeah, well, first of all, the history of the Democrat Party, the Democrats did start
There is
the
no
KKK.
such thing as a Democrat Party.
Democratic. In the 1960s, it was the Democrats, not the Republicans, who stood in the schoolhouse doors and didn't allow black children to mingle with white children.
Right, it was conservative. You're talking conservatives. Let's call George Wallace what he was. He was a conservative. He was not a liberal. He might have been a Democrat, but he was a conservative.
And it was a Democratic president that got him out of the schoolhouse door. It was a Democratic president that got...
A liberal president.
A liberal president. It was a Democratic president that enacted Voting Rights Act, Democratic president that enacted Civil Rights Act, Democratic president that enacted...
Martin Luther King was a Republican. The guy
who
wrote
the
I Have a Dream speech was a Republican. Yes, indeed he was. Most of the people involved in the 1960s movements were Republicans.
You're right, and you're again, this is you and Patrick using this point that before the 70s, most of the white racists in the South were Democrats, because the conservative party in the South was Democratic. And remember radical Republicans? Anybody know Thaddeus Stevens? I mean, the radical Republicans of the 1860s, 1870s, 1880s, and forward were radicals. They were left-wing radicals.
Whatever. You guys had Robert Byrd serving in the Senate until what? 5 years ago?
Well,
former member of the KKK, most senior Democrat in the Senate? Come on.
Yeah, let me bring it back to the report. First of all,
your anecdote proves nothing.
As someone born and raised in Oklahoma City, I lived there 24 years. I lived in Oklahoma City at the time of the Oklahoma City bombing, knew people who were involved in that and who died from that, had the bombing actually shake the apartment that me and my girlfriend shared in college. So that thing, first, I don't appreciate as a conservative being compared to the people who did that on my hometown. I will say about the 2009...
But he was doing it in the name of your values.
But you know what? In the 2009 Homeland Security report, I'm glad you brought this up because I was going to mention this too. The Department of Homeland Security, whether it was under Bush or Napolitano at the time, said in that report it was going to be the veterans coming back from Iraq and Afghanistan who were going to turn into right-wing extremists, go back and arm themselves, form militias, and attack the United States.
Jennifer, you're mischaracterizing it.
No,
what they said was that those people were being targeted by right-wingers for recruitment because they already had weapons skills, they were not afraid to kill people anymore, and they had been trained in demolition.
Okay, let's say that
I read the report.
Which was the case
too.
with McVeigh. That was exactly the case with McVeigh.
But
he was trained to kill in Iraq.
My point is with the 2009
Bush
report.
won.
2009 report, it is now 2015. That was 6 years ago. What they predicted didn't happen, and what they predict in this report is not going to happen either. I'll tell you this. I believe the White House was pressured to release this report. The White House was pressured to release this report because this week they had a summit on anti-jihad terrorism, and they have been pressured by CAIR, the Council on American Islamic Relations, to fight back and to talk about how it's really right-wing Americans.
So you're suggesting that the reality of the numbers, that 34 people being killed by right-wing extremists, 21 people being killed by Islamic extremists, is irrelevant. It wasn't the reality of the numbers. It's not science. It's not reality. It's your fantasy, your paranoid fantasy about how the Obama administration was...
What about the hundreds of millions of people killed by left-wing extremists in Russia and China? Can we not talk about them? How about the IRA in Northern Ireland? They were socialists.
Here's the thing. The reality is this.
There's bad people on both sides. They're all jerks. Why don't we all condemn them and move on?
First of all, Stalin was a conservative. He was not a liberal.
Oh, he was a conservative communist. Okay,
we're all condemning them all.
Well, he believed in free markets and limited government. I got it.
All
he was
I'm
authoritarian.
saying is that there is a real right-wing extremist danger. And the Department of Homeland Security has shown that. They've done a report on it. It was sovereign militia who drew down...
I'm not denying it.
It was sovereign militia who drew down on Bundy's... on the
that was not the Weather Underground.
Interior
at the Bundy
Department's officers who were trying to corral Bundy's cattle and get them off federal land. It was sovereign militia who greeted those 50,000 kids seeking to get asylum from persecution who came across the border.
To answer your question, the reality is this. Patrick's right. This number doesn't include the 3,000 Americans killed on 9/11. So what they just magically start calculating this report on September 12th? You know, this kind of data manipulation is what people don't appreciate. And look, we live in a global world. This doesn't include the casualties around the world.
More of tonight's Big Picture Rumble. Welcome back to tonight's Big Picture Rumble. Still with me, Patrick Hedger, Stuart Acuff, and Jennifer Kearns. Let's get back to it. Republicans in Oklahoma have voted to ban advanced placement United States history classes from being taught in Oklahoma high schools. They claim that these classes only teach students what is bad about America. Instead, lawmakers would have the students read the Ten Commandments and speeches by Ronald Reagan. Seriously, I'm not kidding. Apparently, Republicans are in denial about America's history being 2.5 centuries of positive, progressive change. Meanwhile, other Republican lawmakers in Oklahoma are trying to ban all AP classes from being taught in public schools. And lawmakers in South Carolina, Georgia, and North Carolina want advanced placement classes to stop teaching evolution, which means anybody who goes into any science class at all is going to be toast. So, Jennifer, what's with this conservative war on education?
Well, you know, yet another story out of my home state, Oklahoma. As a junior high school student, I took AP classes in Oklahoma, so a big fan of those. Look, I think the sad thing about this story, I think the Republican representative's intent was good, but as with many Republican campaigns, the messaging somehow goes awry, and it just feeds into this progressive perception that Republicans, especially in these red states, these flyover states, they don't like science, they're dumb, they're a bunch of Neanderthal, mouth-breathing knuckle draggers. Having said that, my understanding of the situation, the representatives didn't actually like the testing surrounding those AP classes. They felt that
there was
the
no
test...
testing.
There's an AP test every year.
Test curriculum.
Yeah, but the test is not defined.
This is the reason why they were
opposed
opposed
to the curriculum. I mean, just the broad
funding.
principles are defined.
Well, the test is a national
class.
standard. I mean, I took AP test. I took an AP U.S. history test. Everybody took the same test, so it is defined.
Maybe everybody in your
the-
school did, but not everybody in the nation. The
issue
college,
the issue was in the AP testing, these representatives felt that the tests in the curriculum really focused on blowing out of proportion these travesties that have happened in America, like slavery.
Here's an example of the test. Okay? This is one of the actual, the 25 questions on the AP history test. Analyze how debates over civil rights and civil liberties.
How'd you get that? Everybody has a different test.
Have influenced political. No, this is, again, this is not a test question. This is.
You just said it was.
Well, okay. Let me rephrase this. It's not is this A or B? It's write something, right? Critical thinking. This is advanced placement is a lot about that. So anyhow, analyze how debates over civil rights and civil liberties have influenced political life from the early 20th through the early 21st centuries. I mean, this and apparently what this guy's all upset about is that would include the women's rights movement that led to the 20th Amendment. That would include the civil rights movement that led to the Voting Rights Act. It would include the labor movement, and it would include, well, at least those. And these were all things that conservatives vigorously opposed.
And it would include a very strong progressive populist movement in Oklahoma that existed from the end of the 1800s until throughout the Depression.
From Oklahoma through Wisconsin, you had that was the hotbed of
that stretch, including Texas. Yeah. But Oklahoma had Woody Guthrie was from Oklahoma. Oklahoma had per capita one of the strongest labor movements in the country. The state, and you know this, the state motto is labor omnia vincit, labor over all. In other words, workers.
Good luck with that now.
Good luck with that now.
And notice it didn't say labor unions overall. It appreciated good, hardworking Oklahomans. My point about the AP curriculum was they didn't appreciate that those things were given preference.
But those workers chose unions, I'll tell you that.
Well, if workers chose unions, you'd be in favor of right-to-work laws.
I'd like to hear the rest of it, Jennifer.
Yeah, the problem that the representatives in Oklahoma had with the AP testing and curriculum is that it gave such importance to these issues like the things that America had done wrong, slavery, the treatment of Native Americans,
genocide,
which admittedly was awful. However, it didn't give as much importance to the things America's done right. World War II, we saved millions and millions of Jews from the Holocaust. other things, they felt that there was no balance. And I'll tell you this, for the Democrat strategists out there who want to know this for 2016, education is going to be a huge issue for 2016. And this is how Jeb Bush could get elected president, and other Republicans like Scott Walker could. People are sick and tired of having the liberal agenda forced down their children's throat at taxpayer-funded schools, and that's what this is really about.
As someone that just recently went through AP US history, I mean, probably more recently than anybody here, I just recently went through that class. I graduated high school in 2008. I took AP US history, took the test. Look, there's a lot of things that were really important that we learned in that class. I think it's important to talk about, you know, the things that the progressives want talked about in these classes. But again, it seemed like we were just harping on Civil War, slavery, Civil War, slavery. I mean, there's a lot more to history than a couple-year war that occurred and then the legacy of slavery. There's a lot more to American history than
this
that.
rhetoric. Wait a second. I just have to say something. This rhetoric that Jennifer
I just sat through one of those classes within the decade, so
yeah,
I'm just telling you what I experienced.
And I understand why a conservative would be upset. I understand, Jennifer, why you think this is the liberal catechism, essentially. My word, not yours. Yeah. And that's because America is a liberal nation. George Washington declared it. He said, this is a liberal nation. I hope I shall ever see America be more liberal. We were the child of the Enlightenment. We were the radicals. Right. We were the revolutionaries.
That's right.
We were born imperfect, our nation. And we went through a whole series of progressive changes. We got rid of slavery. We got rid of, we re-enfranchised women. We franchised labor. Every single one of those steps along the way. You may think this is the liberal curriculum. It's the history of the United States. And I realize that conservatives don't like the fact that America has...
the liberal progressive FDR did in World War II. That's a bit of an issue, and I think that's what people are talking about. I mean,
you don't know that we won World War II?
Well, we very rarely touched on the diverse history there. I'm just telling you.
Can I just say one thing, really? Seriously, you made light of a 5-year war that cost the lives of 650,000 Americans.
I didn't make light of it. I'm just telling you that's all that an entire
2-year war.
I didn't say a 2-year war. I just said a couple-year war is a little bit shorter than a several century-long history of the United States.
But that
you're making light of the entire history of the United States.
No, I'm not.
Yes, you are.
That war fed into the struggle for women's abolition. It fed into the struggle against legalized segregation and Jim Crow. It fed into the labor movement, the bloodiest history of any labor movement in the Western world. It fed into freedom movements and more justice in America. And that is the history of America.
It's not the entire history of the Americas. I mean, I'm just telling you.
Look, if you're doing
I don't know when you took
American,
AP US history. I'm just telling you when I took it. That's all we were harping on.
Well, those are the consequential turning points in American history.
I came from West Tennessee. All of my teachers were conservatives. I have had plenty of conservative American history. And I am with you 1,000% on FDR and World War II. You couldn't get me to be more with you on the righteousness of America in World War II. We saved the world. And we saved the world with American workers. And
I think that's all the representatives in Oklahoma are saying, is that we want to give that equal billing
they're saying that they
with
want
the
the
sins
Bible, they want the Ten
Commandments,
Commandments, and they want Ronald Reagan's speeches, and they want to,
anyway, tear down this wall was kind of important, but all right.
Well, except that it didn't happen. I mean, that happened on George Herbert Walker Bush's reign, and it had nothing to do with anything.
And so is the line from Lincoln's second inaugural when he said, "If God ordains that every drop of blood drawn by the lash shall be redeemed with a drop of blood drawn by the sword, then the will of God be done." That was the message in 1864 to the Confederates, that they were not giving up, that he was not giving up.
And again, we're not arguing with you. All this stuff is important, and just saying that their concern seemed to be that we're a narrow focus.
In Oklahoma, they are arguing.
That doesn't sound like that. I mean, I read the story.
All right. Don't look now, but unions are starting to make a comeback. As Bloomberg points out, oil workers have walked off the job for higher wages and better working conditions. Dock workers have snarled West Coast ports. Personnel staffing oil terminals at the port of Long Beach, California, are threatening to strike. In Detroit, union leaders girded for contract talks this year will push for the first raise veteran auto workers have received in a decade. End of quote from Bloomberg. Thanks to the staggering levels of income inequality in our country, unions are gaining momentum and rallying around the idea of opportunity for all, not just for the wealthy elite. Conservatives are trying to destroy unions, but conservative policies are actually helping to bring unions back. So, Stuart, unions have done great things for this country. They helped build the middle class.
I would argue we did build the middle class.
Yeah, absolutely. So how did, well, I'd say
Detroit
unions
middle
and tax
class looks
policy.
real good.
Right, yeah, 34 years of Reaganomics has just devastated the middle class.
Yes, there are some good things happening. We have a lot of work in front of us. We are broadening not only our organizing, but we're broadening appeal to people who are not in unions now, to worker centers, to immigrant workers. And people understand that they have lost wages for 35 years, that in fact the richest people in this country, the 0.01% of the top people in this country get all of the gains of our increases in GDP.
I'm just curious. We have just 2 minutes left. Now, I'm curious, Jennifer and Patrick, this chart, which I think we can take full screen, it starts in 1918, ends in 2008. The red line is the income going to the top 1%, and the blue line is union membership. And as union membership goes up, the top 1% goes down. I mean, they're still mind-bogglingly rich, but it goes down. And then as union membership goes down, the 1% goes, or the top 10%, excuse me, goes back up again. How could you argue that having unions is a bad thing in the face of just this basic empirical evidence?
Well, first off, correlation does not equal causation. That's
I think we can demonstrate
statistics 101, and this doesn't account for how much larger the income actually has been in real terms. But again, if unions are so great, and you guys are arguing unions are the best thing in the world, they're so great for workers, why aren't they voluntary? Are people too stupid to figure out what's good for themselves?
Unions
you guys
are
fight
voluntary.
against. You guys
unions
no
are the
right
result.
to work law.
No,
right to work laws.
Unions are entirely voluntary.
No, they're not.
If more than 50% of the people in the workplace say we don't want a union anymore, it vanishes. And if
Well,
more
what
than
about the other
50%,
49%? Very undemocratic, very unprotecting of the minorities.
No,
Nobody
that is
can be-
democracy. Jennifer, we have 40 seconds.
We know, talk about inequality. Look at the West Coast longshoremen, the union out there, selfishly holding off goods and services, bringing those to the West Coast. Yes, and you know what?
I can't get my junk from China because this guy wants a decent wage. Oh my God!
They're arguing over their members making $40 an hour instead of $38 an hour. Ask the 20 million Americans who don't have jobs. Ask the nearly 50 million who are on food stamps.
Why do
When's the last time they had a job
conservatives
that paid
think that a working person making $40 an hour is a bad thing?
We're not, but look at the average
just
of
said
it.
it. You're
The
just
beginning
sneering at these
FedEx or
people.
UPS driver makes about 18 bucks an hour. Look at the union. You want to talk about
So
inequality?
you
it's
want to
in
drag
pay.
all of America down to the lowest common denominator?
Absolutely
and
not.
the UPS
Okay, we gotta wrap it up.
driver is a union member.
There you go. Patrick
A
Hedger,
Teamster.
Stuart Acuff, Jennifer Kearns, thanks for joining me today.